when your final stand becomes legendary, begins with a moment that many chosen ones recognize only after they have already lived through it. There comes a point in certain journeys where the pressure reaches its highest level, where every challenge, every betrayal, every attempt to weaken your resolve seems to converge into one decisive situation. For a long time before that moment arrived, the tension had been quietly building. Opposition may have appeared in subtle forms at first. Misunderstandings, criticism, manipulation, or attempts to slowly undermine your credibility. Each incident alone may not have seemed significant, but together they formed a pattern. The chosen one found themselves navigating a landscape where trust was tested repeatedly, and where the weight of expectations and resistance grew heavier with time. Eventually, the situation reached a moment where the chosen one realized something profound. There was no longer any space left to retreat emotionally, morally, or spiritually. Compromise would have meant abandoning truth. Silence would have meant allowing deception to continue unchallenged. And surrender would have meant betraying the very integrity that had guided their journey up to that point. In that moment, the chosen one did not explode in anger or desperation. Instead, something far more powerful occurred. They made a stand that was calm, deliberate, and grounded in self-respect. Their response was not driven by ego or revenge, but by clarity. It was the kind of stand that emerges when someone understands exactly what they represent and refuses to move away from it. Moments like this rarely feel dramatic while they are happening. In fact, the chosen one may have believed they were simply protecting their dignity or defending the truth in a difficult situation. But history often reveals that these moments carry far greater significance than they appear to in the moment. A single act of composure under pressure can define a person's legacy more powerfully than years of quiet effort. What makes the chosen one's stand remarkable is not the conflict itself, but the discipline with which it was handled. While tension surrounded the situation, the chosen one maintained an unusual level of calm. They did not allow chaos to dictate their actions. Instead, they responded with clarity, patience, and strategic awareness. Observers who were present during this moment began noticing something they did not expect to see. In what should have been a breaking point, the chosen one displayed stability and confidence. Their composure created a powerful contrast with the pressure surrounding them. People who witnessed the event began recognizing that they were seeing more than just someone defending themselves. They were witnessing a moment of leadership under pressure. The central message of this story, therefore, begins to emerge clearly. The chosen one's final stand was not merely an act of resistance against opposition. It was a demonstration of discipline, integrity, and strategic thinking in the face of overwhelming pressure. What seemed like a personal battle has now become something much larger. The way the chosen one handled that decisive moment carries the kind of clarity and strength that others study when they want to understand how true leaders respond in their most difficult hours. The pressure that built toward the final stand did not arrive in a single moment. It developed slowly, almost quietly at first, like distant thunder that gradually moves closer until the sky above you is filled with tension. The chosen one's story rarely begins with open confrontation. Instead, it starts with small moments that seem insignificant when viewed alone. A comment that feels slightly dismissive, a situation that appears unfair but not severe enough to challenge openly. A subtle shift in how people speak or behave around you. At first, these moments can be easy to overlook. Many chosen ones have a natural inclination toward patience and understanding, which means they often give others the benefit of the doubt. They assume misunderstandings can be resolved through calm communication, and that most conflicts are temporary. This mindset allows them to navigate life with compassion, but it also means they may tolerate patterns longer than others would. Over time, however, those small moments begin forming a pattern that becomes difficult to ignore. The criticism grows more frequent. The misunderstandings seem less accidental. Situations begin appearing where the chosen one's intentions are questioned, or their credibility is quietly undermined. The environment may begin shifting in subtle ways that create tension without clearly revealing its source. For the chosen one, this stage of the journey can feel confusing because the pressure rarely arrives as a direct attack. Instead, it appears through layers of indirect resistance that slowly wear down confidence and patience. At first, the chosen one may try to resolve the situation peacefully. They might attempt conversations that clarify misunderstandings or express their perspective calmly. They may look for ways to restore balance and prevent conflict from escalating. Yet in many cases, these efforts do not produce the resolution they hoped for. Instead, new situations appear that repeat the same patterns in slightly different forms. The chosen one begins realizing that what they are experiencing is not simply a series of unrelated incidents. There is a deeper dynamic unfolding beneath the surface. This realization marks an important turning point because it changes how the chosen one perceives the environment around them. Instead of viewing each conflict individually, they start recognizing the larger pattern connecting them. They see how certain individuals react when truth is spoken too clearly, or when independence challenges the expectations of the group. They begin noticing how manipulation often hides behind politeness, and how opposition can operate quietly through suggestion, rumor, or subtle exclusion rather than direct confrontation. As this awareness grows, so does the emotional pressure surrounding the chosen one's journey. The realization that patterns exist can create a sense of isolation. When someone begins seeing dynamics that others appear unwilling to acknowledge, they may question whether their perception is accurate. Doubt becomes one of the most powerful tools used against the chosen one during this stage. They may wonder if they are misinterpreting events or overreacting to circumstances that others consider normal. This internal questioning becomes part of the pressure building toward the final stand. The chosen one must learn to trust their own perception, even when it contradicts the narrative presented by those around them. At the same time, the external environment often intensifies the tension. Individuals who benefit from existing dynamics may attempt to reinforce the narrative that the chosen one is misunderstanding the situation. They may dismiss concerns as exaggerations or suggest that the chosen one is being overly sensitive. These responses create additional layers of pressure because they attempt to redefine reality itself. The chosen one finds themselves navigating a space where truth is not openly denied, but subtly reframed until it becomes difficult to discuss clearly. Yet, even in the midst of this confusion, the chosen one continues observing. They notice the consistency of certain behaviors and the way patterns repeat across different situations. They see how reactions intensify whenever honesty enters the conversation. Gradually, their understanding becomes sharper and more precise. What once felt like scattered incidents now forms a clear picture of the environment they are navigating. This clarity does not remove the pressure, but it changes how the chosen one responds to it. Instead of reacting impulsively to each situation, they begin developing patience and strategic awareness. They learn that not every conflict requires an immediate response, and that observation often reveals more than confrontation. During this stage, the chosen one also develops emotional discipline. The tension surrounding them may provoke frustration or anger, but they realize that reacting emotionally could reinforce the narrative others are attempting to create about them. Remaining calm becomes a form of strength rather than weakness. By maintaining composure, they protect their credibility and prevent others from controlling the direction of the conflict. This discipline becomes one of the most important qualities that prepares the chosen one for the decisive moment that will eventually arrive. As time passes, the pressure surrounding the chosen one continues building. The patterns they recognized earlier become more visible to those who are paying attention. Situations arise where the contradictions within the environment begin revealing themselves more clearly. Individuals who once felt confident in their control over the narrative may start showing signs of frustration as their strategies fail to produce the desired results. The chosen one's calm presence disrupts expectations that they would eventually collapse under pressure. Instead of retreating, they remain steady. Instead of reacting with chaos, they respond with clarity. Observers begin noticing this contrast. What was once dismissed as misunderstanding gradually appears as resilience. People who were previously silent start recognizing the discipline required to maintain composure in such an environment. They see how the chosen one continues navigating each situation with patience and integrity, despite the increasing tension around them. These observations slowly reshape how the environment perceives the chosen one. The pressure that was once intended to weaken them begins revealing their strength instead. Yet the final stand has not arrived yet. The pressure continues rising until the moment when retreat is no longer possible. Every pattern that has been building eventually converges into a situation where the chosen one must decide how they will respond when everything is on the line. The long period of observation, discipline, and patience becomes preparation for that moment. When it finally arrives, the chosen one will not be acting out of impulse. Their response will reflect everything they learned during the long buildup of pressure. What others see as a sudden stand will actually be the result of months or even years of quiet preparation. This is why the chosen one's final stand appears so remarkable when observers look back on it. The composure displayed in that decisive moment was not created instantly. It was forged slowly, through each challenge, each attempt to undermine their resolve, and each decision to remain aligned with truth, even when it would have been easier to retreat. The pressure that built toward that moment was not merely an obstacle. It was the process that refined the chosen one's character and prepared them to respond with the kind of clarity that transforms a personal battle into a legendary example of strength. The discipline that prevented emotional collapse becomes the defining quality that separates the chosen one from those who expected them to break under pressure. When the situation finally reached its most intense point, the environment around them may have appeared chaotic, unpredictable, and emotionally charged. Many people in similar circumstances would have reacted instinctively, allowing frustration, anger, or exhaustion to dictate their response. That reaction would have been understandable. After all, the chosen one had endured a long period of tension, subtle opposition, and attempts to weaken their confidence. Yet what happened instead revealed something deeper about their character. At the moment when emotional collapse seemed most likely, the chosen one did something remarkably rare. They remained disciplined. This discipline did not appear suddenly. It was the result of everything they had learned during the long buildup of pressure. Over time, they had developed the ability to observe before reacting, to pause before speaking, and to examine situations from a broader perspective rather than responding to immediate provocation. These habits of restraint became the invisible armor that protected them when the final confrontation arrived. Instead of allowing emotion to overwhelm their thinking, the chosen ones slowed down internally. They recognized that the moment unfolding around them would have lasting consequences, not only for themselves, but for everyone observing the situation. This awareness created a space between stimulus and response, a brief but powerful moment where discipline could take control of the narrative. Maintaining discipline during conflict requires more than simple patience. It demands emotional intelligence and self-awareness. The chosen one understood that the environment surrounding them was expecting a particular reaction. Those opposing them likely anticipated anger, defensiveness, or visible frustration. Such reactions would have confirmed the narrative that the chosen one was unstable, overly sensitive, or incapable of handling pressure. By refusing to deliver that reaction, the chosen one disrupted the entire structure of expectations built around them. Their calm presence introduced uncertainty into a situation where others believed they understood exactly how events would unfold. This is where discipline becomes more than self-control. It becomes strategy. By staying composed, the chosen one forced the environment to confront the truth without the distraction of emotional chaos. Observers who might have dismissed the message suddenly found themselves focusing on the clarity of the chosen one's words and actions. When someone remains calm while others attempt to provoke them, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. The chosen one's composure created a mirror reflecting the behavior of those around them. People began noticing who remained grounded and who reacted with hostility or manipulation. This contrast revealed more about the situation than any argument could have accomplished. Of course, maintaining this level of discipline did not mean the chosen one felt no emotion. Beneath the calm exterior, there may have been frustration, sadness, or exhaustion accumulated over the long period of pressure. Discipline does not eliminate these feelings. It simply prevents them from controlling the outcome of the moment. The chosen one acknowledged their emotions internally, but refused to let them dictate their behavior. This distinction is what transforms discipline from repression into strength. Instead of suppressing emotion completely, the chosen one learned to channel it into clarity. They allowed the energy of their experiences to sharpen their focus rather than scatter it. Each word spoken during the confrontation carried deliberate intention. Each pause demonstrated control rather than hesitation. Every action communicated that the chosen one was not reacting blindly, but responding thoughtfully. This level of composure surprised many observers because it contradicted the assumptions formed during the earlier stages of conflict. Some individuals may have believed that sustained pressure would eventually cause the chosen one to lose control. Instead, they witnessed the opposite. The greater the tension became, the more disciplined the chosen one appeared. This reversal of expectations shifted the power dynamic in the room. When people realize that someone cannot easily be provoked into emotional chaos, the usual strategies used to destabilize them lose effectiveness. The chosen one's discipline therefore became a protective shield against manipulation. It prevented opponents from steering the situation in directions that would benefit their narrative. Another important aspect of this discipline involved clarity of purpose. The chosen one understood why they were taking a stand. Their motivation was not personal revenge or the desire to win an argument. Instead, it was rooted in truth and self-respect. This clarity allowed them to remain focused even when the environment attempted to distract them with side issues or emotional bait. Whenever conversations drifted away from the central truth of the situation, the chosen one calmly redirected attention back to the facts. This steady focus prevented the discussion from becoming fragmented or chaotic. Observers began recognizing that the chosen one was not only composed, but also remarkably precise in their communication. Every statement reflected careful thought and alignment with their principles. This precision reinforced the impression that they were acting from conviction rather than impulse. Over time, the atmosphere surrounding the confrontation began shifting subtly. The tension that once seemed overwhelming gradually transformed into curiosity among those watching. People who had expected a dramatic emotional breakdown instead witnessed a demonstration of leadership under pressure. The chosen one's discipline turned the moment into something larger than a personal conflict. It became an example of how composure can change the direction of an entire situation. Even individuals who initially doubted the chosen one's perspective began reconsidering their assumptions. The calm clarity displayed in such a high-pressure moment forced them to examine the situation more carefully. This is one of the hidden powers of discipline. When someone maintains control over their emotions in a tense environment, they create space for truth to emerge without distortion. Emotional chaos often clouds perception, making it easier for manipulation to hide within confusion. By remaining steady, the chosen one removed that confusion and allowed the reality of the situation to become visible. Their discipline became a lens through which others could see more clearly. As the confrontation unfolded, the chosen one likely did not realize how deeply their composure was influencing those around them. They may have been focused simply on staying aligned with their values and communicating their perspective honestly. Yet, from the perspective of observers, something extraordinary was happening. They were witnessing someone demonstrate emotional mastery in a moment where most people would have surrendered to instinct. That demonstration left a lasting impression. It showed that strength is not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it appears as quiet certainty that refuses to collapse under pressure. By the time the moment ended, the chosen one had achieved something far greater than defending themselves. They had revealed the power of discipline as a leadership quality. Their refusal to collapse emotionally turned what could have been a chaotic confrontation into a defining example of composure and clarity. The discipline that prevented emotional collapse did more than protect the chosen one in that moment. It transformed the entire narrative surrounding the conflict. What once appeared to be a situation designed to break them instead became the stage where their strength was revealed. And for everyone who witnessed it, the lesson became impossible to ignore. When discipline guides your response, even the most intense pressure can become the moment that defines your greatest strength. Why your opponents misjudged you begins with a realization that often arrives only after the conflict has already unfolded. Those who opposed the chosen one did not simply disagree with them. They formed assumptions about who the chosen one was and how they would behave under pressure. These assumptions shaped every strategy used against them. From the beginning, many opponents believed they understood the chosen one completely. They saw someone who had shown patience, compassion, and restraint for a long time, and interpreted those qualities as weakness. To them, the chosen one appeared predictable, someone who could be gradually pushed aside, pressured into silence, or emotionally exhausted until they eventually stepped away from the situation. This misjudgment became the foundation of every decision made against them. What the opponents failed to recognize was that patience is not the same as powerlessness. The chosen one's quiet observation and willingness to avoid unnecessary conflict were not signs of fear, but signs of discipline. During the long buildup of tension, the chosen one had been watching carefully, learning the dynamics of the environment and understanding how different individuals responded to truth and pressure. While others believed they were controlling the narrative, the chosen one was gathering clarity. Each situation that seemed like a small victory for the opposition was actually revealing patterns that would later become impossible to ignore. This is the first way the opponents misjudged the chosen one. They mistook observation for submission. Because the chosen one did not immediately respond to every provocation, those opposing them assumed they were incapable of confronting the situation directly. They believed that repeated pressure would eventually lead to emotional collapse. Many of their strategies depended on provoking reactions that would undermine the chosen one's credibility. They expected anger, frustration, or defensiveness that could be used as evidence to support their narrative. Yet when the decisive moment arrived, none of those expectations came true. Instead of reacting impulsively, the chosen one responded with clarity and composure. This response exposed the second misjudgment made by their opponents. They underestimated the depth of the chosen one's resilience. People who rely heavily on manipulation or social pressure often assume that everyone responds to conflict in the same predictable ways. They believe that sustained pressure inevitably produces fear or emotional instability. What they fail to understand is that individuals who have spent time reflecting on their values and principles develop a different relationship with pressure. For the chosen one, the long period of tension had already served as preparation. Each challenge had strengthened their ability to remain steady when confronted directly. By the time the final stand occurred, the chosen one was not encountering pressure for the first time. They had already faced it repeatedly and learned how to navigate it without losing their clarity. Another way the opponents misjudged the chosen one involved their perception of influence. Many individuals who attempt to control situations believe influence comes from controlling the narrative. They assume that shaping how others perceive events will determine the outcome of any conflict. Because of this belief, they focus heavily on reputation, rumor, and public perception. In their strategy, if the chosen one could be portrayed negatively enough, their voice would lose credibility, and the conflict would resolve in their favor. Yet this approach overlooked a critical factor. Authenticity carries its own form of influence. The chosen one's credibility did not come from carefully constructed narratives, but from consistent behavior over time. Observers who had watched their actions for months or even years recognized the integrity behind their words. When the final confrontation occurred, people were not evaluating the chosen one based solely on rumors or accusations. They were comparing the narrative presented by the opponents with the behavior they had personally witnessed. The calm composure displayed by the chosen one in that moment reinforced the authenticity many had already sensed. This is where the third misjudgment became visible. The opponents believed they were controlling the narrative, but they had underestimated the intelligence of the observers around them. People are often more perceptive than those attempting manipulation realize. While some may remain silent initially, they continue observing quietly. They notice inconsistencies in behavior and compare them with what they are told. Over time, these observations form impressions that are difficult to erase with simple accusations. When the chosen one remained calm and precise during the confrontation, observers began recognizing that the narrative surrounding them did not align with reality. The contrast between expectation and reality became impossible to ignore. The chosen one's composure disrupted the story the opponents had been trying to maintain. Instead of confirming the accusations made against them, the chosen one demonstrated the very qualities that had been questioned: integrity, patience, and clarity. Observers who had previously remained neutral began reevaluating what they had heard. They realized that someone capable of maintaining such discipline under intense pressure was unlikely to be the unstable figure described by the opposition. The misjudgment therefore extended beyond character into strategy itself. The opponents had built their entire approach on the belief that pressure would produce a predictable reaction. When that reaction did not occur, their strategy lost its foundation. Without emotional collapse from the chosen one, the narrative they had constructed began weakening. Attempts to provoke further reactions only reinforced the chosen one's calm presence, making the contrast even more visible. As the situation unfolded, the environment began recognizing that the chosen one was not the person their opponents believed them to be. Instead of a fragile individual easily pushed aside, they appeared as someone capable of navigating conflict with remarkable control. This realization shifted the power dynamic significantly. People who once doubted the chosen one's perspective began reconsidering their assumptions. Even individuals who initially supported the opposition started questioning whether they had misunderstood the situation. In many ways, the opponent's greatest mistake was assuming that strength must appear in obvious forms. They expected aggression, loud confrontation, or visible dominance as signs of power. Because the chosen one did not display those traits during the early stages of conflict, they concluded that no real strength existed beneath the surface. What they failed to recognize was a quieter form of strength rooted in discipline and self-awareness. This type of strength does not reveal itself immediately because it does not depend on dominating others. Instead, it appears when circumstances demand clarity and courage simultaneously. When the final stand occurred, this hidden strength became visible to everyone watching. The chosen one did not need to raise their voice or overpower anyone physically. Their calm certainty carried more authority than any aggressive reaction could have achieved. Observers recognized that true strength often appears exactly like this: composed, deliberate, and unwavering in its alignment with truth. By misjudging the chosen one, the opponents unintentionally created the conditions that allowed this strength to be revealed. Had they understood the depth of the chosen one's resilience, they might have approached the situation differently. Instead, their assumptions led them to escalate the pressure until the decisive moment arrived. In doing so, they set the stage for the chosen one to demonstrate exactly what they had failed to see from the beginning. The lesson emerging from this moment extends far beyond the conflict itself. It shows that people often underestimate individuals who choose patience over immediate reaction. Quiet observation can be mistaken for submission, and restraint can be interpreted as weakness. Yet beneath those qualities can exist extraordinary resilience, waiting for the moment when it must finally appear. When that moment arrives, the contrast between expectation and reality becomes impossible to ignore. And in that contrast, the chosen one's true strength becomes visible to everyone who once believed they understood them completely. The strategic clarity behind your stand becomes visible only when observers step back and examine the moment carefully. What may have appeared to some as a simple confrontation was actually something far more precise and intentional. The chosen one did not stumble into that decisive moment unprepared. Their response was shaped by weeks, months, and sometimes even years of quiet observation, reflection, and internal discipline. While others around them reacted impulsively to situations as they arose, the chosen one had gradually developed the ability to see patterns that others overlooked. They watched how people behaved when challenged, how narratives were formed, and how certain individuals attempted to control the direction of conversations. By the time the final stand arrived, the chosen one was not walking blindly into conflict. They had already seen enough to understand the landscape they were standing in. Strategic clarity often begins long before the moment where action becomes visible. During the earlier stages of tension, the chosen one learned to listen more than they spoke. They noticed which individuals reacted defensively when certain topics appeared, and which ones attempted to redirect conversations away from uncomfortable truths. They saw how rumors could be used to create confusion, and how small distortions of reality could spread quietly until they shaped the perception of the entire environment. Instead of reacting to every instance of manipulation immediately, the chosen one took time to observe how these patterns developed. This patience gave them something incredibly valuable: perspective. They were able to see the bigger picture instead of getting lost in individual moments of conflict. When the decisive moment arrived, this perspective allowed the chosen one to respond with unusual clarity. They understood not only what was happening in that moment, but also why it was happening. This awareness meant that their words and actions could be directed toward the root of the problem, rather than its surface symptoms. Many people facing confrontation become distracted by emotional provocation. When accusations, pressure, or hostility appear, the natural reaction is to defend oneself against every statement being made. Yet this approach often leads to chaos, because it allows opponents to control the structure of the conversation. The chosen one avoided this trap because they recognized the strategy being used against them. Instead of chasing every accusation or responding to every provocation, they focused on the core truth underlying the situation. By doing this, they prevented the discussion from being scattered across countless distractions. Their clarity acted like a compass, keeping the entire interaction oriented toward what actually mattered. This level of strategic thinking surprised many observers because it contrasted sharply with the tension surrounding the situation. While others attempted to escalate the conflict through emotional pressure, the chosen one maintained a steady focus on facts and principles. Each statement they made was deliberate. Each pause was purposeful. Even their silence carried meaning, because it demonstrated that they were not being rushed or manipulated into speaking without reflection. Strategic clarity also influenced how the chosen one used timing during the confrontation. Timing is one of the most underestimated elements of leadership under pressure. Saying the right thing at the wrong moment can reduce its impact, while speaking at the precise moment when attention is focused can transform a simple statement into a powerful revelation. The chosen one appeared to understand this instinctively. They did not overwhelm the moment with unnecessary explanations or emotional reactions. Instead, they waited for opportunities where the truth could be expressed clearly and directly. When those moments appeared, their words carried weight because they were supported by composure and evidence rather than urgency. Observers began recognizing that the chosen one was not reacting randomly, but moving through the confrontation with careful awareness of each step. Another important aspect of this strategic clarity involved restraint. Many people believe that strength requires dominating a confrontation or proving superiority over opponents. Yet the chosen one demonstrated a different form of strength: the ability to stop before crossing the line into aggression. They understood that the purpose of their stand was not to humiliate anyone or escalate hostility. Their goal was to reveal truth and protect their integrity. Because of this understanding, they avoided responses that would have created unnecessary damage or distraction. Even when provoked, they maintained boundaries that preserved the dignity of the moment. This restraint made their words even more powerful, because it showed that their actions were guided by principle rather than ego. As the confrontation unfolded, the environment began shifting in subtle ways. People who had initially expected a dramatic emotional battle started noticing something unusual about the chosen one's presence. The calm precision of their responses made it difficult for opponents to maintain the narrative they had constructed. When someone remains composed and focused, attempts to provoke them often appear exaggerated or desperate. Observers began noticing this contrast more clearly with each passing moment. The chosen one's strategic clarity was exposing the imbalance within the situation without requiring aggressive confrontation. Their calm presence acted like a mirror, reflecting the behavior of those around them. The more disciplined the chosen one remained, the more visible the emotional reactions of their opponents became. This contrast gradually shifted the perception of the entire conflict. Strategic clarity also allowed the chosen one to remain anchored in their purpose rather than becoming consumed by the outcome of the confrontation. Many people facing intense conflict become focused solely on winning the moment. They measure success by whether their opponent is defeated or embarrassed. The chosen one approached the situation differently. Their focus was on maintaining alignment with truth and integrity, regardless of how the confrontation ended. This perspective removed the fear of failure from their actions. Because they were not trying to dominate the situation, they could remain calm and deliberate even when tension reached its highest point. This mindset is what transforms a difficult moment into a demonstration of leadership. Leadership under pressure is not about controlling others. It is about controlling oneself and remaining aligned with principles that extend beyond the immediate conflict. Observers recognized this quality in the chosen one's behavior. They saw someone who was not reacting out of pride or insecurity, but out of a commitment to clarity. That recognition created a profound shift in how people interpreted the situation. What once appeared to be a personal dispute now looked like a lesson in composure and strategic thinking. The chosen one may not have intended to create such a demonstration, but their actions naturally produced it. Strategic clarity, therefore, became the element that elevated the chosen one's stand from a simple act of resistance into something far more meaningful. It showed that strength does not always appear in dramatic gestures or loud declarations. Sometimes it appears in quiet precision, in the ability to navigate complexity without losing focus. By remaining aware of the bigger picture and refusing to be distracted by emotional provocations, the chosen one demonstrated how discipline and awareness can transform even the most tense confrontation into a moment of profound influence. For those who witnessed it, the lesson became unmistakable. When someone stands with clarity, patience, and strategic awareness, they gain a level of control that cannot easily be undermined. Opponents may attempt to provoke them, manipulate narratives, or create confusion, but none of those strategies succeed when confronted by steady focus on truth. The chosen one's stand revealed exactly this kind of strength, and it is this strategic clarity that later made people look back at the moment and recognize it not simply as a confrontation, but as an example of leadership that others would study long after the conflict itself had ended. When observers began studying your behavior, marks the moment when the conflict quietly transformed from a private struggle into something far more influential. Up until this point, much of the tension surrounding the chosen one had unfolded within a limited circle of people directly involved in the situation. The chosen one may have believed that the conflict was simply a matter of defending their integrity against opposition. Yet, as the final stand unfolded, something subtle but powerful began happening around them. People who had once remained silent, neutral, or distant started paying closer attention. What they were witnessing did not resemble the dramatic confrontation they might have expected. Instead, they saw composure, discipline, and clarity displayed in the middle of what should have been an overwhelming moment. This contrast captured their attention immediately. When observers see someone maintaining calm under pressure, curiosity naturally follows. Many individuals watching the situation may have previously accepted the narrative presented by the chosen one's opponents. They might have believed that the conflict was exaggerated, or that the chosen one was simply reacting emotionally to misunderstandings. But as they observed the final stand, those assumptions began shifting. The chosen one's behavior contradicted the expectations that had been created around them. Instead of chaos, there was order. Instead of emotional outbursts, there was restraint. Instead of confusion, there was precise communication. These qualities forced observers to reconsider what they thought they understood about the situation. Human perception often changes when people witness actions that conflict with previously accepted narratives. The chosen one's discipline created exactly that kind of shift. Observers began replaying earlier events in their minds, comparing what they were seeing now with what they had been told before. Gradually, patterns started becoming visible. They noticed that the chosen one had remained consistent in their behavior even during moments of intense pressure. They realized that the accusations or assumptions surrounding the chosen one did not align with the composure they were now witnessing. This realization sparked a deeper level of attention. People were no longer merely watching the conflict, they were studying it. This is the stage where the chosen one's actions began evolving into a kind of living lesson for those around them. Individuals observing the situation began analyzing how the chosen one handled pressure so effectively. They noticed the deliberate pacing of their responses and the way they refused to be drawn into emotional traps. Some began recognizing that the chosen one had allowed opponents to reveal their own behavior simply by remaining calm and focused. Instead of fighting aggressively, the chosen one had allowed truth to surface naturally through contrast. For many observers, this was an unfamiliar approach to conflict. They were used to seeing arguments escalate quickly into emotional battles where both sides lost clarity. The chosen one demonstrated that conflict could be handled differently. Their discipline showed that maintaining composure could actually increase influence rather than diminish it. This realization created a ripple effect among those watching. People started asking themselves whether they could handle pressure with similar control in their own lives. The chosen one's behavior was no longer just an example of personal resilience. It was becoming a model others wanted to understand. Some observers even began discussing the situation privately, analyzing what they had witnessed. They talked about how unusual it was for someone to remain so steady during confrontation. They compared the chosen one's actions with how most people typically react under stress. Through these conversations, the chosen one's stand gained a new dimension. It was no longer simply an event, but a case study in emotional intelligence and leadership under pressure. The most fascinating aspect of this stage is that the chosen one may not have been aware of how closely they were being observed. In many cases, individuals who display true composure do not realize the impact their behavior has on others. They are focused on staying aligned with their principles rather than performing for an audience. Yet that authenticity is exactly what makes their example so powerful. Observers can sense when someone is acting genuinely rather than attempting to impress others. The chosen one's calm responses carried authenticity because they were not rehearsed or exaggerated. They were simply the natural expression of someone who had spent time developing self-discipline and clarity. As more people began recognizing this authenticity, the narrative surrounding the conflict continued shifting. What once appeared to be a struggle between opposing sides started looking more like a demonstration of leadership qualities emerging under pressure. Even individuals who had previously supported the opposition found themselves reconsidering their perspective. They could not ignore the evidence unfolding before them. When someone consistently demonstrates patience, clarity, and integrity in a high-pressure moment, it becomes difficult to maintain negative assumptions about them. Observers who once doubted the chosen one began respecting the way they handled the situation. This shift did not necessarily require public declarations of support. Often, it appeared quietly through changes in tone, attitude, and conversation. People who had previously avoided engaging with the chosen one's perspective began listening more carefully. Some approached them privately to express admiration for their composure. Others simply observed silently, absorbing the lessons the moment offered. In this way, the chosen one's stand began influencing people far beyond the immediate conflict. The observers were not just witnessing a confrontation. They were learning something about human behavior and leadership. They were seeing that strength could appear in calmness rather than aggression. They were discovering that emotional discipline could neutralize manipulation more effectively than confrontation. Perhaps most importantly, they were recognizing that truth does not always need to be forced into the open. Sometimes it emerges naturally when someone remains consistent and composed long enough for others to notice the contrast between integrity and chaos. The chosen one's behavior therefore created a ripple of reflection among those who watched the moment unfold. People began asking themselves questions they might not have considered before. How would they respond if placed in a similar situation? Would they have the discipline to remain calm when others attempted to provoke them? Could they defend their values without losing control of their emotions? These questions turned the chosen one's stand into something far greater than a personal victory. It became an example of what is possible when someone refuses to allow pressure to dictate their behavior. The observers realized that they were witnessing a rare quality: the ability to maintain clarity when everything around you attempts to create confusion. Over time, this realization strengthened the chosen one's influence within the environment. Influence does not always grow through loud declarations or dramatic victories. Sometimes it grows quietly through the respect earned by consistent behavior. The chosen one's calm responses during the conflict left a lasting impression because they demonstrated principles rather than merely speaking about them. Observers saw discipline in action rather than hearing it described in theory. This kind of example carries a unique power because it speaks directly to human experience. People remember moments where someone handled pressure with unusual grace. Those moments become reference points for how leadership can look in real life. In the aftermath of the conflict, individuals who had watched the chosen one stand began sharing their observations with others. They described how the chosen one remained composed while others attempted to escalate the situation. They talked about the clarity of their words and the patience in their responses. These conversations continued spreading the influence of the moment, even after the confrontation had ended. What began as a single stand gradually became a story that others repeated when discussing resilience and integrity. The chosen one's actions had created a narrative far more powerful than the one their opponents originally tried to construct. Observers now saw the chosen one not as someone caught in conflict, but as someone who had demonstrated extraordinary discipline under pressure. And as this perception spread, the final stand began evolving into something that people would remember long after the details of the conflict faded. It had become an example of leadership born from composure, a moment where someone proved that true strength is revealed not by overpowering others, but by mastering oneself when the pressure is greatest. When your stand became a leadership lesson, emerges as the moment where the chosen one's experience transforms from a personal struggle into something much larger than the original conflict. At first, the chosen one likely believed they were simply defending their integrity in a difficult situation. Their focus was on maintaining clarity, staying aligned with truth, and refusing to allow pressure to dictate their behavior. Yet as time passed and observers reflected on what they had witnessed, the significance of that moment began expanding. What had once seemed like a tense confrontation now appeared as a powerful example of leadership under pressure. The chosen one's stand contained lessons that extended far beyond the individuals involved in the conflict. It demonstrated principles that people in many different environments could recognize and apply to their own challenges. This is the stage where the metaphor of leadership training begins to make sense. When individuals study leadership in institutions known for discipline and strategy, they often examine real-life moments where someone faced overwhelming pressure and responded with clarity rather than chaos. These moments are valuable because they reveal how true leadership operates when circumstances are at their most demanding. The chosen one's stand reflected exactly that kind of moment. Without formal training manuals or rehearsed strategies, they demonstrated the same qualities that leadership programs attempt to teach: emotional control, awareness of the bigger picture, and the ability to remain anchored in principle, even when the environment becomes unstable. Observers who reflected on the event began noticing how each stage of the confrontation revealed a specific leadership principle. The first principle was composure. When tension reached its highest point, the chosen one did not allow their emotions to control the outcome. Composure under pressure is one of the most important traits in leadership because it prevents panic from spreading through the environment. When people see someone remaining calm while others are reacting impulsively, they naturally begin trusting that person's judgment. The chosen one's calm presence therefore stabilized a situation that might otherwise have spiraled into confusion. This alone provided a powerful example for anyone watching. It showed that leadership is not about dominating a moment, but about guiding it toward clarity. The second principle revealed by the chosen one's stand was strategic patience. Many conflicts escalate because individuals feel pressured to respond immediately to every accusation or provocation. This urgency often leads to mistakes, emotional reactions, and fragmented communication. The chosen one avoided this trap by taking time to consider each response carefully. They did not rush to defend themselves against every comment made by their opponents. Instead, they focused on the core truth of the situation and allowed unnecessary distractions to pass without reaction. This patience forced the conversation to remain centered on what actually mattered. Observers began recognizing that patience is not passive behavior. In moments of tension, patience can be the most powerful strategic decision available. By refusing to react impulsively, the chosen one maintained control over the direction of the interaction. Another leadership lesson that emerged from the chosen one's stand involved clarity of purpose. People facing confrontation often become distracted by the desire to win arguments or prove others wrong. When that happens, the original purpose behind their actions can become blurred. The chosen one demonstrated a different approach. Their focus remained on protecting truth and maintaining self-respect rather than humiliating their opponents. This clarity allowed them to navigate the confrontation without becoming entangled in unnecessary hostility. Observers noticed that every statement the chosen one made was aligned with this purpose. There were no dramatic attempts to dominate the room or silence others through intimidation. Instead, there was steady confidence rooted in principle. This quality reminded those watching that leadership is not measured by volume or aggression, but by consistency between words and values. As people reflected on the chosen one's behavior, they also began recognizing the power of restraint. In many environments, individuals believe that strength requires dramatic action or forceful confrontation. Yet the chosen one's stand demonstrated that restraint can create a deeper form of authority. They did not exploit the moment to embarrass their opponents or escalate the conflict beyond necessity. Even when they had the opportunity to retaliate emotionally, they chose discipline instead. This restraint preserved the dignity of the moment and prevented the situation from devolving into hostility. Observers began realizing that restraint requires extraordinary self-control. It means choosing long-term integrity over short-term satisfaction. For many people watching the event unfold, this lesson left a lasting impression. They saw that leadership involves the courage to stop before crossing the line into unnecessary aggression. The chosen one's behavior also revealed another important leadership principle: the power of authenticity. Authentic leadership emerges when actions reflect genuine conviction rather than calculated performance. The chosen one did not appear as someone attempting to impress an audience or win approval through dramatic gestures. Their calm responses and deliberate communication felt natural rather than rehearsed. This authenticity made their actions more credible in the eyes of observers. People can sense when someone is acting from sincerity rather than ego. Because the chosen one's stand was rooted in genuine belief rather than the desire for recognition, it carried a depth of influence that could not be manufactured artificially. Observers who witnessed this authenticity began discussing the moment with others. They described how the chosen one remained composed while others attempted to provoke chaos. They explained how their words were measured and how their actions reflected integrity rather than aggression. These conversations gradually transformed the confrontation into something resembling a leadership lesson. Individuals began referencing the moment when discussing how to handle pressure in their own environments. Some spoke about it as an example of emotional intelligence in action. Others highlighted the discipline required to remain calm when faced with provocation. Through these reflections, the chosen one's stand began gaining symbolic meaning. It represented a moment where leadership appeared naturally rather than through formal authority or titles. This transformation is what makes certain moments unforgettable. They reveal truths about human behavior that people recognize immediately when they see them. Leadership is often misunderstood as a position of control or status. Yet moments like this demonstrate that leadership is ultimately about influence created through character. The chosen one did not command authority through hierarchy or power. Instead, they earned respect through the way they handled adversity. This form of leadership often leaves a deeper impact because it emerges organically from real experience. Observers who witnessed the chosen one's stand understood that they were seeing something rare. They were watching someone demonstrate the qualities that leadership training attempts to cultivate, but cannot always guarantee. Over time, the story of that moment continued spreading beyond the original environment where it occurred. People who heard about it interpreted it as an example of how discipline and clarity can transform conflict into a moment of growth. The chosen one may never have intended for their actions to become a lesson for others. They simply chose integrity when confronted with pressure. Yet that choice created an example that resonated far beyond the original situation. For those who heard the story later, the moment carried a message about courage and self-mastery. It showed that leadership does not require perfect circumstances or official recognition. Sometimes it appears when someone stands firm in their values during the most difficult moment of their journey. The chosen one's final stand, therefore, became more than a defense of personal dignity. It became a living demonstration of leadership principles that others could learn from. And this is why people began speaking about the moment in terms that resemble training or study. When individuals witness composure, discipline, and authenticity displayed so clearly in a moment of pressure, they naturally want to understand how such strength is possible. The chosen one's stand answered that question without needing explanation. It showed that leadership is not created by titles or positions. It is revealed through the choices a person makes when everything around them tries to pull them away from truth. Why this moment changed your role forever becomes clear only after the tension has faded and the chosen one has had time to look back on what truly happened. In the middle of the conflict, it may have felt like a simple matter of survival. The chosen one was focused on holding their ground, maintaining integrity, and responding with clarity under pressure. Yet once the dust settles and the environment begins reflecting on the moment, the deeper significance begins to reveal itself. The stand that once felt like a personal test quietly transforms the chosen one's role within the community around them. People no longer see them in the same way they did before that decisive moment. Before the stand occurred, the chosen one may have been perceived as someone quiet, observant, perhaps even underestimated by those who assumed that patience meant weakness. Some individuals might have believed the chosen one would eventually retreat when the pressure intensified. Others may have viewed them as simply another participant within the environment, someone whose voice could be ignored or dismissed without consequence. But when the moment arrived where retreat was no longer possible, and the chosen one responded with discipline and composure, those perceptions began shifting immediately. The environment witnessed something they had not anticipated. They saw someone who could withstand pressure without collapsing into emotional chaos. They saw someone capable of responding to conflict without losing sight of their principles. That display of composure under pressure left an impression that could not easily be forgotten. As observers reflected on what they had seen, a new narrative slowly began forming around the chosen one. Instead of being remembered as someone caught in conflict, they were now associated with the strength they demonstrated during that moment. People began recalling the clarity of their responses and the calm presence they maintained while others attempted to escalate the situation. These details became part of the story told about the confrontation whenever it was discussed later. Over time, that story reshaped how others viewed the chosen one's place within the environment. The stand had elevated their role from participant to example. This transformation did not happen because the chosen one demanded recognition or attempted to claim authority. It happened because people naturally gravitate toward individuals who demonstrate stability during moments of uncertainty. When tension rises in any environment, observers begin searching for signals that indicate where clarity and leadership exist. The chosen one's behavior during the confrontation provided exactly that signal. Their composure showed that they were capable of navigating pressure without losing perspective. This quality made others more willing to listen to their voice in the future. The chosen one therefore discovered that their influence had quietly expanded without deliberate effort. Another reason this moment changed the chosen one's role involves the trust it created among those who witnessed it. Trust is not built through speeches or declarations. It is built through actions that reveal a person's character when circumstances become difficult. The chosen one's stand demonstrated consistency between their values and their behavior. People watching the moment unfold could see that the chosen one was not reacting impulsively or pursuing personal revenge. Instead, they were guided by clarity and principle. This consistency made their actions credible in the eyes of observers. Once people trust someone's character, they begin paying closer attention to what that person says and does in the future. In this way, the chosen one's stand created a foundation of trust that reshaped their relationship with the surrounding environment. The moment also revealed something important about the nature of influence. Influence is often misunderstood as the ability to control others or dominate conversations. In reality, influence grows when people recognize authenticity and strength in someone's actions. The chosen one did not need to prove their authority after the confrontation ended. The moment itself had already demonstrated what needed to be seen. Observers understood that the chosen one possessed a rare ability to remain grounded under pressure. This realization made their voice more meaningful whenever future situations required clarity or guidance. People who once ignored their perspective began considering it more carefully because they had witnessed the discipline behind it. This shift did not mean that every individual suddenly agreed with the chosen one. Differences in opinion can still exist even when respect grows. But the tone of those differences began changing. Instead of dismissing the chosen one's perspective automatically, people approached it with greater thoughtfulness. The stand had proven that the chosen one was capable of handling complex situations with maturity and insight. That reputation influenced how future conversations unfolded within the environment. Over time, the chosen one noticed subtle changes in how others interacted with them. Some individuals began seeking their perspective when conflicts arose, because they trusted the clarity demonstrated during the confrontation. Others simply treated them with a new level of respect, recognizing that they had endured pressure without compromising their integrity. These changes reflected a shift in perception that could not easily be reversed. Once someone has shown such discipline during a defining moment, people remember it. That memory becomes part of how the individual is perceived, long after the event itself fades from immediate discussion. The chosen one may not have sought this transformation in their role, but it emerged naturally from the moment they chose integrity over retreat. This is the quiet power of decisive moments in life. A single stand taken with clarity can reshape how others see you for years afterward. It reveals qualities that might otherwise remain hidden during ordinary circumstances. When people witness someone navigating pressure with calm strength, they recognize a form of leadership that does not rely on titles or authority. They see that leadership can emerge simply from the courage to remain aligned with truth when it would be easier to walk away. As the chosen one reflects on the experience, they begin understanding that the stand was not only about defending themselves against opposition. It was also about stepping into a new level of responsibility within their environment. Their actions created expectations, because people now associate them with discipline and clarity. This does not mean the chosen one must carry the burden of being perfect or solving every conflict that appears. Instead, it means that their example continues influencing others quietly. People remember how they handled that moment, and those memories shape how they approach their own challenges. In this way, the chosen one's role evolves naturally from participant to example. The moment that once felt like a final battle becomes a turning point that defines their presence within the community. What began as a personal test of integrity ultimately revealed something much larger. The chosen one possesses the kind of strength that others look toward when situations become uncertain. And that realization changes their role forever. When your final stand becomes a legacy, gradually reveals the deeper meaning behind everything the chosen one experienced during that decisive moment. At the time, it may have felt like nothing more than a difficult confrontation that demanded courage, discipline, and clarity. The chosen one may have believed they were simply defending their integrity and refusing to retreat from truth. Yet as time passes and people reflect on what they witnessed, the significance of that moment begins expanding beyond the conflict itself. What once appeared to be a personal struggle becomes recognized as an example of leadership revealed under pressure. The chosen one's stand demonstrated that strength is not measured by aggression or dominance, but by the ability to remain aligned with principle when circumstances become overwhelming. Observers who watched the moment unfold remember not only the words that were spoken, but the composure that surrounded them. They recall the patience displayed when others attempted to provoke emotional reactions, and the clarity maintained when confusion filled the environment. These qualities transform the memory of the confrontation into something that carries lasting influence. It becomes a story that people reference when discussing courage, discipline, and integrity. In this way, the chosen one's final stand evolves into a legacy that extends far beyond the original situation. The lesson emerging from this experience is both simple and profound. Moments of intense pressure often reveal the true character of a person more clearly than years of ordinary circumstances. When someone chooses composure over chaos and truth over convenience, their actions create a standard that others can recognize and learn from. The chosen one may not have intended to create such an example, yet the power of their response ensured that the moment would not be forgotten. Final message. The stand that once felt like your most difficult battle has now become proof of your strength. It shows that when you remain disciplined and clear, even in the face of opposition, your actions can inspire others long after the conflict itself has passed.